Welcome to Fine Line Station, where I read out letters and emails sent by you, the listeners. They are real-life stories about the uncanny, the creepy, and the unknown. I am your host, Charlie Fox, and I hope you're ready to listen to today's story. It's good to be back after a short break, and I hope everyone is staying cool as the weather gets warmer. I have a small backlog of stories that have been sent in while we've been away, and I thought this one would be a good start. We have an email sent in by Jack Hayes, which is titled The Wrong Train. He makes some points about not being the biggest fan of my show, which is fine. I mean, I know I have somewhat niche topics I cover, but hey, as long as you're entertained, right? And as long as I can honestly share the writer's voice, I think I've done my job as host. So with that, let's take a wander through this story. I have heard of your show before. I don't mean to be rude, but I used to think not very highly of you and your content. It's well produced and having audience participation is always good, but rather your subject matter isn't what I'd personally choose. The stories you share feel like a strange in-between of horror and just odd occurrences that happen throughout a person's life. I wish you'd simply pick a lane, either embrace the creepy stories or debunk what is being told. I'm sure you'll claim that because it's real life it doesn't always follow a traditional structure of a tale, but still. Perhaps it's that thinking that caused all of this to happen, because otherwise why would such an unusual experience happen to someone so usual? And so Charlie, I write to you now with my own story. Something I had never even considered an option, but I hope it will free my mind of the event that transpired. 2 weeks ago, I took the wrong train and ended up somewhere I can't stop thinking about. To understand how this happened, I must tell you about myself first. I live a very orderly life. Every day I follow the same morning routine, then finish it off the same way every evening. I know some people might think I'm too invested in keeping everything in my life perfectly aligned, but to me it makes sense. It can be frustrating when things go wrong because not everything is in my control, but by planning carefully I can mitigate when things don't work out how I want them. I have backup plans and have thought through the worst case scenario so I know how to get my day back on track. It does take a lot of effort to think all these things through, but I am both used to it and believe it is the best way to live. And thus I have my plans for the day. I catch the same train to work and the same train home. I eat certain foods on certain days. I wear clothing that is easy and low effort. By having a plan in place for these things, I know where the day is headed. I can't tell the future, of course, but I'd say I'm as close as you can get. Sometimes things happen. I get bumped and spill my morning coffee, which causes me to change into my backup shirt. The underpass I use for work is closed, so I have to take an alternative route. A traffic accident causes me to miss the exact 5-minute window I have to catch the tram to my office. But this is why I always have backup plans. One morning something unexpected happened. I was late to the train due to my usual path being blocked off for maintenance. By the time I quickly walked to the platform, I had missed the first train. While unusual, this has happened before. It was why I had my backup train times memorized. I headed over to the signs to double check which platform I needed, but in doing so I accidentally bumped a lady carrying her morning groceries home. I thought I only spent a few minutes helping her write her bags, but by the time I got to the board I had missed my backup train as well. This hadn't happened before. Panicking slightly, I made my way to the help desk to ask for the next train into the area I worked. The single counter was small and had a large plastic barrier up, so there was only a small slit down the bottom. I saw movement behind, but the barrier was so cloudy from age that I could really only see a silhouette. It took a few moments for them to acknowledge me with a nod of their blurry head, and I asked which train to catch next. The voice was muffled, but I could just hear enough that I was being directed to platform 7. It was the last platform at the very end of this terminal. I had never taken it before. I double-checked that this was correct, but the outline figure simply nodded again and gestured for me to leave. I was running very low on time at this point, so I said a quick thanks and darted to the end of the station. Indeed, there was a train waiting there, and as I made my way onto the first carriage, the train started its engine and pulled away from the platform a few seconds later. I thought I was lucky to make it within the nick of time. How wrong I was. I made my way to one of the seats I usually pick. 2 rows and facing forwards of travel, and took a seat. My heart was still pounding from both racing to get to this train and the leftover panic from my routine deviating so much. It took me a moment, but I soon realised I was the only one on this carriage. I reasoned this wasn't too unexpected. By this point, I had missed the morning rush, and most people tend to go to the carriage closest to the driver to get off the train quicker. Taking a few deep breaths, I recalculated my plans of getting to work. I would exit off a little further than usual at a different stop, but it would still get me within a good walking distance of the tram, and I should only be 20 minutes late to work. I pulled up my phone and sent a message to my manager. I had been late only twice in my 11 years of working for this company, and I knew I wouldn't get into any serious trouble. Except maybe some light teasing that my plans had gone so awry. Putting my phone away, I continued to relax into my seat as I tried to calm myself further. I may seem like I am overreacting, but things like this always stressed me out. I had gone to therapy as a teenager to help with this need for routine and being over-prepared. When my mother first suggested it, I remember arguing that my parents should be pleased I was so organised and took a schedule seriously, especially since other kids my age were absolute disasters, even my friends at the time. They told me that wasn't necessarily the problem, but rather how I dealt with things when they went wrong. I was stubborn about going for a while, but I did have to admit that they were probably right. Sometimes it felt like the world was ending because something unexpected and, more importantly, outside of my control happened. At first I thought it was kind of useless, but after a few sessions and a therapist that was as stubborn as I was, we managed to make some decent progress. Unexpected circumstances still affect me, but not nearly as bad as it once did. It's not very relevant to this story. I apologize. I fear I'm going off track. But anyway, the important part is that I was able to practice and use some coping mechanisms to deal with what an absolute disaster of a morning it had been. Deep breaths, positive thoughts, and a recalculation of my day. Usually my ride into the main parts of the city was about 14 minutes, give or take a minute depending if it was crowded getting on or off at each stop. I am pretty good at judging how much time has passed, I always have been, so at about 12 minutes I noticed that we hadn't stopped even once. While I had never caught this specific line before, I was sure all trains had to stop at a few stations. How else would they populate the carriages? I ended up reasoning with myself that it was perhaps an express train, one that took you directly from my station to the last few. Checking my phone again for a response from my manager, I realised that my previous text hadn't sent. I had no cellular function at all. This made my stress levels rise back up. While my manager would be fine with me being late, not updating her beforehand was unprofessional. She wouldn't be happy with me. Again, I tried to use my coping mechanisms, but I was reaching my breaking point. So much going wrong in one morning, what are the chances? The train eventually passed the 14-minute mark. It took an extra 7 minutes before the train finally came to a gentle stop and the doors opened. I hesitantly made my way to the doors, and upon exiting, I realised I'd thankfully gotten to a stop I was vaguely familiar with. I was a little far and it would take me longer to get to my building, but the relief of getting off the train was overwhelming. I was still flustered, but at least I had made it. I blame those feelings for why it took me so long to realise everything was wrong. No, that wasn't quite the right word. It wasn't obvious enough to be wrong. Things were just slightly off. You know when you look at something as a whole and everything seems completely normal and your mind can grasp it, but if you look too closely, that illusion slowly falls away and leaves you confused. As I walked away from the platform, I could see odd things out of the corner of my eye. I was happy to finally see other people again, but they also contributed to the offness of the place. For example, I could have sworn someone was walking backwards, but upon properly looking, they returned to a normal forward stride. I shook my head off and brushed my hair out of my face. The sun was far harsher than it had been in the morning, and I was starting to feel it in my suit. I passed a group of teenagers in uniforms. They must have been heading to school, and without meaning to, I overheard their conversation as I passed them. It seemed normal at first, the usual tones and ebbs and flows of a teenager's banter. It was after I had passed them that my brain finally comprehended what they had said. It was complete nonsense. Their questions ended with a higher note and their tones matched one of them rolling their eyes. I only speak English with a little bit of German on my dad's side, but even I knew they surely weren't speaking any existing language. It was just a random babble. At this point, any relief of finally getting off that train was replaced with alarm, and it felt like ice was travelling through my veins even as the sun shone on. I just couldn't understand what was happening. It felt like a hyper-realistic dream, though I'd never had one like this before. I continued moving, and again I swore out of the corner of my eye some of the street signs' shadows were going toward the sun. My breath was coming out in short huffs now, and the direct sun was overwhelming. I must have stumbled to the side of a building at some point, because when I looked up, someone was asking if I needed help, and I thankfully understood this person. I told them I felt a bit faint and asked for some directions to the tram to get out of the sun and be on my way. At first, I didn't think he'd heard me because he didn't respond. As I was about to repeat myself, the words died on my lips. This man was somewhat passable, normal height, normal build, dark hair that was a tad long and an angled face. But his eyes, they were bright green and just stared at me. He didn't move his eyes away from my own and didn't blink even though I had to several times. Just thinking about it again sends shivers down my spine. The memory of this time starts to blur here, but the last thing I remember was him speaking to me in a clear, even voice. You were chosen to be here. Accept it or remain ignorant. He may have said more, but I don't recall. The next thing I remember is waking up with paramedics around me pressing a cold cloth to my forehead. I must have passed out in the sun and someone had called them for me. The paramedic, who thankfully seemed completely normal, explained that I probably had heat stroke. They asked me a few questions and I couldn't believe it was almost midday at this point. It hadn't felt that long at all. I was about to ask them to let me borrow a phone to call my work, but found my mobile was now working. I looked around for that man, thinking he had been the one to call the paramedics, but there was only a worried-looking woman who was peering over at me. The stranger was gone. I thanked the lady and told the paramedics what I remembered. Or, well, I told them about the wrong train incident. As I started my story and mentioned the 7th platform, one of the paramedics, a younger male with light hair, frowned at me. He said he also often used that station, but the 7th platform hadn't been operational in months. There had been some kind of accident, so it had been shut down, and there hadn't been enough funding to fix it up since. He said the heat stroke must have left me confused with what happened. I gulped and simply nodded. The stress from so many things going wrong in the morning meant I had misheard the worker and hadn't even realised I'd gotten on a different platform. My mobile phone was just being spotty. It had done that once before. The strange occurrences was due to dehydration. The bright sun was why everything felt off. The man I met and the clear words he had spoken that were imprinted in my memory, I couldn't explain that. Some of the things I saw did fade enough that I could easily lie to myself about what I'd seen. But that man and his words continue to follow me, and I dream of that place now. It was kind of traumatic, so that's why it's sticking around, right? Those dreams I have though, they feel more vibrant and zealous than any others I've had before. I keep remembering that stranger who spoke to me. He hasn't directly appeared in my dreams, but I feel like he's there, lurking in the corner of my eye, yet disappearing when I finally glance to the side. Perhaps this is all placebo, and by focusing on it so intensely it makes the dreams continue and increases my discomfort, and so on the cycle goes. I hope by sending this event to you, I will no longer have to hold on to it. Or rather, it will no longer have a hold on me. Since then, I haven't seen anything strange and my life has gone on. I took a few days off work, but afterwards continued my normal life with my normal routines. Oh, I do have a third backup train now though, in case I ever need it. Whew, and that is all we have from Jack. Thank you for sharing your story. Sometimes things go awry and we find ourselves in situations we could not prepare for. Some would say that's one of the joys of life. Being unable to prepare leaves so much freedom for possibility. I don't know why you saw what you did, Mr. Hayes. Perhaps it was heat exhaustion, or perhaps you peered somewhere else for just a little while. That's the thing with these stories, you see. The answers aren't always important, but it's rather sharing your experience that matters. I am glad you chose to share your story with us though, even with your aversion to my content. Who knows, maybe someone else has experienced something similar and can now compare it to you. For now, that is all we know. This has been another broadcast by Fine Line Station. I'm Charlie Fox, and I'll speak to you next time.